Thank you very much. It is such a blessing and honor to be here with you today. I look around the room, and for May and how complicated the month of May is, especially for mothers. I'm just impressed by the size here. My dear friend Joe Scheidler, who I feel like was a mentor since about the age of 18 when I met him with Pro-Life Action League. When he first came to Cincinnati in 1980, he was scheduled at a conference where Father Marks was speaking in one room with about 200 people. Bernard Nathanson, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who had just had his conversion, was speaking to about 400 people in the other room. And Joe was scheduled up against them, and he had about 8 people in his room. And I never forget the funniest thing he said to start his talk off was, I swear if I'd have been alive at the time of Christ, they'd have scheduled me up against the Sermon on the Mount. So I lead in with that story because when Bill called me, he called after, by the grace of God, a story was written in LifeSite News about an effort that I began with some wonderful women. They're also friends of mine, and we call it Speaking of Motherhood. And there we go. Between the 6 of us mothers, we do have 44 children. These trusting friends of mine followed me, and thank goodness I didn't take them over a cliff when I said, can you guys share your stories if we go out and speak about this? And we go to college campuses, and we show the world in our simple way the beauty of children. Because that is really what is absent right now in America. America has embraced the China mentality. Young women and young men think they're supposed to have only 2 children. And so I got this idea because of the experience I had in nursing, which I'll get to in a second, that we need to show them the beautiful faces of our family and of our children, and I'll flip to those in a little bit. So they had no idea what they were getting into. None of them had ever done any public speaking, and I said, can we just go get a picture taken? And I'm like, okay, dressed up, followed me to get the picture. And they're like, what are we going to do with this? So anyway, we have gone out wherever we asked God, open the doors where we can go. This article came out of nowhere, which is how Bill found us. And unfortunately, today's conference is scheduled up against family activities in Cincinnati because May's very busy. I don't have any graduates this weekend, but everyone else was consumed with child activities. So Bill still asked me to come, and I'm sorry that they can't be here with me because they have miraculous stories about what happens when you trust God unconditionally and you say yes to Him, always, even in the face of dire medical conditions and other situations that are telling you no in the world. So I'll share a little bit about them as I go along here. But that's how I, an ordinary housewife and mother, and someone that's been involved in the pro-life my whole life, ended up here before you today. I grew up with 10 brothers and sisters, so I really understand the fun, hecticness, chaos, and beauty of having that many brothers and sisters. My mom was Italian and my dad was Irish, so I say I'm usually Irish till I need to be Italian. A priest friend of mine said, no, actually what it is one sins and the other one feels guilty. So, but my parents were just wonderful, wonderful parents. We were Catholic. They instilled in us so early and often this unconditional trust in God. When I was at the age of 4, my mother collapsed when she was 6 weeks pregnant with my youngest brother with a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. And for those that don't know what that is, it's when a major vessel in your head bursts and your head is covered with blood. She was 36 years old, rushed to the hospital. I was 4. I was there when it happened. And within an hour, 100 of my relatives were on their knees in the waiting room praying the rosary when the surgeon came out to my dad and said, we really should just let her go. She'll be a vegetable, it's not worth it. And my dad said, please go back in one more time. I beg you, I have 10 children at home. And so he emerged an hour later, and my grandmother heard him on the phone to his partner say, I just participated in a miracle. My mom survived. She is still alive today. My youngest brother David is the father of 8, and if you've ever heard of Sienna Communications, which gives 10% of phone bills away to pro-life organizations, that is his company that he started. So he's doing his own pro-life work. The amazing thing that my dad just told me about 3 years ago and never shared with my mother is that the doctor told my dad my mom had a case of metastatic brain cancer that had eaten through a vessel in her head. They sent her home to die. And my aunts and uncles and grandmother, my dad nursed her back to health till she had a first C-section of their 11th baby. And she's still alive today with 59 grandkids. So that's a pro-life story if I've ever heard one. But it's so important as parents, and I've learned this on my own with 9 children, to instill the confidence and trust in your parents and in God particularly early and often. So we grew up, of course, with sayings like, trust God, He knows what He's doing. This life is 1 second in all of eternity. Work with God, He'll work with you. There's always room for one more. That's why What About Bob has become my favorite movie. There's always that Bob at our table. My parents never turned anybody away. Everything in life happens for a reason. You may not understand it, but trust that God sees farther down the road than you do. And most significantly, and something that really defines the theme of my talk today, as my mom, when us girls got old enough, there were 7 girls in our family, and my brother's 4, she would say, never, never say no to God in your marriage. Always remain open to life. You may think you'll get another opportunity if you say no to God and you block that possibility of a soul coming to the world. And if you're lucky, you will get another chance. But that particular soul that may have been conceived, that opportunity is gone forever. And that always really, really stuck with me. Because in life, what we're seeing now is that this generation, and even women my age when I was growing up, they want to control everything. They don't understand that they can't control everything. They don't understand blind trust in God's plan for you in your life. They don't understand the beauty in accepting every single gift that God intends to send you as a child, and for siblings, for your children. My parents often told stories that really were faith-building, and one, which I'll share with you, was the story in communist China of a village where this was back before industry, before there was ever anything but like farm work, and everyone depended on your sons to grow up and support the family and be the breadwinner. And the only son in a family with all other girls was talked about being the strapping young athlete, and the one that was going to be shine as he got older for the family. And he got in a horrible horse accident and broke his hip and his leg at the age of 24. And the family was wringing their hands and they were crying, and they said, oh, what are we going to do? This is horrible. His future will never be the same. And only the father in the family had the calm and wisdom to say, you can't see what God sees. You don't know what this event is. We have to just pray and trust that God has a reason for this. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, the Red China Army rode into the town, rounded up all the boys, healthy and strapping young boys, to go with them, and those that resisted, they shot them on the spot. And there was their brother, their son, laying up in bed with a broken hip and a broken leg, and they passed right by their house and said, he's no good to us. So they saw their father's wisdom, and they saw that God saw something they didn't see, and took something that seemed like a tragedy and turned it into something good, which was sparing him from fighting for communism. So those are the type of stories that my parents constantly told us when we had disappointment or when things didn't go the way we planned them to go. And so it was just always a beautiful example. My dad was the only pro-life attorney in Cincinnati when I was younger that was out there defending those being arrested on the sidewalks for praying. And I didn't quite understand the whole ramifications of that when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. But it certainly was a great example of that. We're supposed to stand up for the truth and for the faith. And I think the reason we're all here is we all have that same thirst for the truth of defending every single life, that every life is beautiful, and we want to pass it on to the next generation.